Okay, it looks like we have most people back in seats and panelists are back up here, so we will start again. I don't know if you had a chance to think about what abundance feels like for you, what an abundant culture or a regenerative culture would feel like to live in, or if you feel like you live in it already, what comes up for you in that. Anyone in the audience want to offer any words that came up in their conversations?
In my conversation, we talked a bit about sharing, and what that brought up for me was just sort of the means of sharing and how they're not always well defined, and how often distribution channels aren't really designed for that purpose, and that requires of producers and of consumers and everyone along this chain to figure out ways in which to share, because that's not being suggested most of the time, and it's often not encouraged. So that can be complicated for a lot of reasons, because, for those reasons.
Thank you. Anyone else want to offer anything? Is that Karen walking over there?
Hi. I feel like abundance is a very positive value in my mind, and I like the feeling of sharing and being generous, and I feel that I do it when I can, and then there are times when I feel like I can't, and then there's also like a feeling of failure or sadness or like not living up to my ideals, and I wonder if this conversation about abundance is sort of starting from a position of having enough, and how to bring in like the full range of what people have, and I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but like abundance when you don't feel abundant, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. And Kelly would like to speak to that.
So first, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a reality for so many people, that I would give if I can, but I can't. I would volunteer if I could, but I just don't have time. And so what we see, speaking specifically about the community that we serve, and from the lens of our work, is that is true. The Black Panthers had one of their best taglines, in my opinion, was survival pending revolution. And so a lot of folks are in survival mode, right? How can I be abundant when I have to choose between, toilet paper or food? How can I feel abundant or feel generous when I just, I got a ticket that's, $75 and I need $75 just so I could get across the bridge, for however many weeks. And so I think that individually we have to look at what it is that we can give, right? How can we survive and still give in the ways that are meaningful for us? If you can, and some folks have been in a survival mode for so long, and their parents and their grandparents have been thinking in survival mode for so long that maybe when they have something, it's like, I earned this, this is mine. It only belongs to me, maybe my kids, but mostly me. And trying to really think of ways that we as individuals can ask for things or offer an opportunity that might mean more to them than giving money or giving time, right? Instead of volunteering at the farm, would you mind just sharing this on Facebook? Like something that folks can feel like they can give, things that you feel like you can give without breaking yourself. it's so often as women that we're willing to break ourselves, you know, to like make things work, you know, like we'll stay in a bad relationship. We'll stay up till whatever time to make sure that whatever needs to be done for the next day is done for the next day. And maybe that's a part of survival so that, you know, our families can thrive or whatever. But being an individual, being a person, a human out in the world, and making sure that you've put your oxygen mask on first, and then, you know, looking around to see if anybody else needs help, even if it's just like, hey, your oxygen mask is right there, you know, you know, but doing what you can rather than, you know, I wish that I could write a check for $50,000, you know?
Yeah, thank you. A word that came up in my conversation, actually, I'm going to let Jessica say it because she brought it up around the new idea, or the idea that this is new.
Oh, yeah. Well, so during the break, we were talking about Kat Anderson, who wrote the book Tending the Wild. And I wrote an article on Medium, on that online platform Medium, about tending the wild. And another book that's made a big impression in organizational circles called Reinventing Organizations. And that book is profiling organizations all around the world that are operating in a different way, which the book is framing as like a new and emergent way, like this new way that all of a sudden these CEOs have discovered that is going to be so much better and is like on the cutting edge. And the word pioneer is used over and over again in it. And my article is basically like, this is Columbusing, to refer to the Columbusing again, that they're discovering something that's new to us. In a sense, I don't even actually think it's new to us, but it's been thousands and thousands of years in the European tradition since we operated that way, for sure. But M. Kat Anderson's book is talking about the stewardship of California for thousands of years and all the principles of the ways that people organized in villages and organized around their food shed is exemplifying these approaches that this other book is calling new. So the point of my article was, this book is great, and all these new ways of working in organizations are really important, but they're actually not new. So that's just the thing, is just to recognize that the wisdom that people have had in working with landscapes for a long time, and to be able to recognize that.
Yeah, thank you. So along those lines of recognizing what is old and new, and the wisdom from marginalized communities and the abundance that we have or that we might not have, how do we continue to encourage and sow abundance in a culture and an economic system that rewards competition and is based on a scarcity model? What do these organizations look like that might operate really well in an abundance model? What are the personal relationships? How do we toggle between, how do we find that sweet spot where competition and cooperation mingle together? I'd love to hear thoughts from everyone. So, Jessica, do you want to start? You were talking about organizations.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, there's two big questions in any organization that have to be grappled with, which is, one, how does the money move? And two, how does the power move? And we need, unfortunately, part of the legacy of collapitalism is that those things aren't explicit and they're not interrogated. They're not grappled with in organizations. And taking a step back and really thinking about that is actually it's really scary. And it brings up a huge amount of stuff for people in the organization. It's a lot to grapple with, and there's no right answers, because there's so many polarities that are at play that you have to be managing to figure out the best way through that question for this organization. And part of what I'm inspired by when I look at, say, the indigenous cultures that were here in California is to my mind, brilliant way that they manage these polarities over thousands of years, and that they figured out what's sustainable. Like, we don't really have any actual experience of sustainability in this society. This society is extremely young and has proved itself to be very unsustainable. So we don't know that human societies can be sustainable in that like deep like knowing of having experienced it. And so I read about other societies so that I know inside me that it is possible. And there's very specific sort of social technologies, for lack of another word, that were utilized that, that deal with fairness. For example, how are resources shared in a fair way? We are wired for fairness. There's all this brain science that says that. There's 5 things that are as important to us as food and water, and one of them is fairness as human beings, and that's like, it's in our neuroscience. There's a whole, you can read all about that. There's like a whole bunch of stuff about that. Our society is not meeting our need for fairness. It's not. And that goes for whether you're at the, making a lot of money or making very little. Your need is not getting made. Your need is not getting met. And so how can we visualize what that looks like when we haven't experienced it, And so reading about cultures where the need for fairness is getting met is like what inspires me to be like, oh, like what can I introduce into this? And, there's a lot of research too on the difference in our neuroscience between equality and fairness. And people collapse those things, but in our minds, those things are very different. And equality actually doesn't always feel fair. Equality of opportunity always feels fair to us, but actually, oh, you have too much money, so I'm going to take your money away and redistribute it, which has been done, doesn't feel fair to us. And
What modern societies do you see that are more fair?
Oh, I mean, a lot's been written about Scandinavia in terms of this, but of course, Scandinavia is not dealing with anywhere the level of diversity or the legacy of genocide and slavery that we have as a society, which really complicates these matters. So, there's no current societies that I'm currently feeling super inspired by in terms of this, unfortunately, but I feel like there are lots of examples from history that we can draw forward into now, and we can learn really important lessons about how this could be done. I mean, and there are, the worker cooperative movement is incredibly inspiring to me, and there is Mondragon, which is a huge region that has a huge number of cooperatives. There's cooperatives being done in lots of areas that have experienced extreme economic depression, and to me, cooperatives are like worker cooperatives and actually consumer cooperatives and producer cooperatives, all kinds of cooperatives are a huge shift, a profound shift from our current models. And so even though those are like little examples, and this book, Reinventing Organizations, is showing different companies and some schools and some nonprofits all around the world that are operating under some different principles. And so I found those somewhat inspiring, but they're somewhat isolated. And there's some evidence too that the different model is held by a sort of a strong leader, and when that leader leaves, then they kind of revert. So that's an issue that has to be grappled with. So this stuff is really complex and it's really hard. But I think even just if you're in an organization, like starting to think about how does the money move and how does the power move is a huge first step, because we don't want to even like think about that or look at that. And it actually does matter.
Rebecca, would you like to speak?
Well, one thing that I was caught by at the end of the climate summit, I got to spend, I don't know if anyone was at an all-day event at Spirit Rock that included Cristiana Figueres, who got the 196 member countries to sign on to COP21, co-presenting with Jack Cornfield, who was moderated by a World Wildlife Foundation attorney who also spearheaded Obama's power plan. And it was this really interesting conversation where what I came to is that group was talking policy, but right before that, a Tibetan Rinpoche had come up to talk about, who's from the East Bay, about his childhood, that he said, we sang to the trees, we sang to the flowers, we everything, nature is sacred, and it is how we grew up. So these ideas that only other communities in, like at the climate summit, the philanthropists offered $500 million to protect indigenous communities, to protect Amazon rainforest as a very important climate strategy. And I was thinking, well, when I hear some of the Amazon elders who were also at the climate summit, and they were talking about how they view nature, they were questioning Jerry Brown, and they were saying, you can't sell the water, you can't sell the carbon in the soil, this is all sacred. And so then hearing the Rinpoche reminding us again, like we sang to the flowers, we sang to the trees. I think this society hears that and thinks, oh, that's sweet that you sang. But you know what? That's fundamentally how we are going to get to the place where we can start to embody a system that actually allows us to say, yes, humans can live on this earth and not fundamentally destroy it. We can actually leave it in a higher state of ecological function within our lifetime. But the higher state of ecological function has to come with such respect that we have been so desperately missing. And we've been exploiting the land and each other and ourselves. And we have debts. So I think that's what regeneration means to me, is if we just pivot this direction, that we say we want to honor ourselves, our brothers and sisters, all sentient beings. And we may not know what it's like to grow up singing to the trees and the birds. Maybe some of us did, and know that there are equals. We can at least honor that that's not a fairy tale. We can honor that that's a real functional society that has left their ecological systems in higher states of function generation to generation, and we can respect that. And what are the social technologies? It's not just hitting, the seeds into your burden basket and allowing half those seeds to leak out to create the perennial bunchgrass meadows in California. It's not just, these technical proto-agriculture functions. It's actually the respect for the other beings. And I think we could get there. And I love that we're actually starting to say we aren't just this white privilegey thing of superiority that's been running everything on this continent for 500 years is it's cracking open and it's over. And it's just time to respect that other cultures have this amazing wisdom, and we don't have to subjugate ourselves and say, oh no, we've been so bad. We can just say, wow, how can we learn from you? What did we do wrong? Let's repair, let's mend, and let's heal the wounds. And I think that's just the time we're in right now. So regeneration can happen, but to have a regenerative system that self-fulfills more beauty every year I think we still have to first cover our debts. And so the debts are it's going to take some time. And so be patient with each other and loving, and know we're going to make some mistakes along the way as we tackle these debts. Yeah.
I just want to go back to Liz. That's so beautiful. And what I want to go back to Liz's question is, I actually think that Tibetan society, they're occupied, so I don't know how you want to consider it, but there's an amazing example there of a society that is fair in lots of really profound ways. And there's a book, Ancient Futures, that's really worth reading, that's about Ladakh, which is a subset, and talking a lot about the culture and the fairness and the agriculture and how they operate things. And it's really inspiring. And that's modern. But she wrote the book as kind of a clarion call because she knew that it was getting destroyed. Yeah.
Nicolette, where are you in all of this?
Okay. There's some big questions on the table right now. I was thinking about more concrete stuff, like when I first started working on the issue of agriculture and sustainability and pollution, fighting against the big industrialized meat companies, which is what I was doing at my job at Waterkeeper. We were looking for good models. And we were trying to answer the criticism of our work that we were just tearing stuff down but not offering a good alternative. And we found the reason I met Bill Nyman was because we began working with the Nyman Ranch organization, which is founded on the whole idea of people coming together who are all working independently on their land, doing what's right for their land and their animals, but have shared values, and who don't want to be marketing and dealing with slaughterhouse issues and dealing with packaging and all that. Just want to farm and farm really well. And so Nyman Ranch was an entity that I'm not trying to sell anything about Nyman Ranch. We haven't been connected with it for 10 years. So I don't care if you buy a Nyman Ranch pork chop or not, okay? Actually, I do, because I think it's great meat and I think it's a great company. But I have no personal stake in it. So I'm not trying to convince you guys to go out and buy the Nyman Ranch product. But that's a model that is really concrete. It's in existence. I've been pointing to it for 18 years now, since I first became familiar with it. To people who argue that the status quo is the only way to do these things. And especially when it comes to like meat production, there's a really dominant model right now of large scale confinement agriculture for for pigs, poultry, and turkey especially, and then for beef, in the feedlot stage. And what the Nyman Ranch organization is doing is working with farmers that are doing it totally differently, but are pulling the people together. And it really is all about relationships. The people working together and saying, okay, we're all doing something that's really different and has a very strong set of shared values. How can we work together to get our product to market under a common label? And so to me, that's one example of a really different model that's working fairly well. I mean, it's not, knocking Tyson out of business just yet, but it's showing a possibility of doing something really differently. So I'm really, proud that my husband is the founder of that company and was the CEO of that company, and that, and we started another smaller company that was a similar idea of pulling together lots of people of shared values and trying to get the product to market under a common name. So I think it's there are lots of examples like this around the country of similar entities, but I think it's going to take those concrete models to replace the dominant industrial system that monopolizes food right now, especially when it comes to the animals.
Since you were in it, can you speak to behaviors or lessons learned around operating in a cooperative model?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I wasn't really. I mean, I had a lot of involvement, behind the scenes, but as any spouse of someone who's in a business knows. But I was never formally part of the Nyman Ranch entity. I have been part of the BN Ranch entity, which is our second company that we started together. But one really interesting thing that happened was that the way the Nyman Ranch model works is that you have a ceiling and you have a floor, that you never pay the farmer. There's a fluctuating scale tied to the commodity market. It's the only way the company can really survive if you do that. But there's a very high floor. So when the commodity prices drop way down, you're protected. So in 1998, pork went to like 3 cents a pound. It was basically, people were throwing it in the garbage bin, basically. It was farmers, a huge percentage, something like 75% of the remaining pig farmers in the country went out of business in 1998 because of that. The Nyman Ranch farmers all survived. And the Nyman Ranch entity, the company, had to spend $1 million over the commodity prices that year to their farmers. But the farmers that lived through that time period are the most loyal of all the farmers in the cooperative. The ones who didn't go through that, however, every year at the annual meeting, which I attended several times, were challenging, why is there a ceiling? Because the commodity price has gone way up. And so it's this really difficult entity, the cooperative model. Man, it was hard, because Bill is dyed-in-the-wool egalitarian, my husband, and he found himself really frustrated with this dynamic of the farmers continually challenging the idea that they should be getting more and trying to get everyone to buy into this idea. There's a floor and there's a ceiling, both. So I just know I'm really fascinated by all the stuff Jessica's been saying about all that stuff. I feel like Diamond Ranch is not the perfect organization by any means, but I feel like it's a really good step towards that way, and it's very difficult, and it's difficult every day to make that work. So it's going to take a lot of thinking, collect. I think probably it's so in conflict with our societal values too. That's probably part of the problem. So these are really big picture issues and big weighty things we've been talking up here today, and it's given me a lot of food for thought about all this. But I do know there are some good models out there, and I think they can serve as, beginning points.
Yeah, there are actually a number of things that I wanted to add on to as I'm listening, and taking the broader ideas that Jessica was talking about in civilizations and communities that have worked in the past, and how do you make that work right now, and looking at it from our point of view, just being business owners. Oddly enough, especially in the early days when I was working day to day with everybody on the floor in production and baking, customers would come in and ask us if we were a co-op, because we were all women. There was Chad baking bread, and everybody else was why? I mean, it wasn't insulting, but it was also curious to me that it was like a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
It was odd that they would think that just because we were a group of women working together, that we had to be pigeonholed in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the complementary side of that is because, and possibly like looking at like macro and micro, I, as the business owner, was working with everybody. And you're not really used to seeing that. And people often assume that we're like far more successful than we are. I remember taking plans written on a napkin to the building department we wanted to get outdoor seating or something like that. And they looked at my plans, which were completely to spec, but they said, "Why didn't you get an architect to do this?" And I said, "Well, I can't afford one." And they said, "I have a very hard time believing that Tartine can't afford an architect." And I said, "Well, we can't." And I had to give them this example, and I pulled $1 and change out, and I said, "Here's 100 pennies, and 6 cents of that goes to our rent. That 6% is sort of standard. 30% or sometimes more goes to labor. 30% or less, if we're really lucky, goes to food cost, and on and on and on, and health benefits and all of this. And there's very little left of profit." And I don't know, I just got this bee in my bonnet that I had to give this random lady at the building department a lesson in the economics of a restaurant. I feel like that example is germane to our homes, the businesses that we all work in, and as society as a whole. And she got it, and she accepted we got our outdoor seating. But how to take those ideas that you ideally see and that you're talking about also, Nicolette, in your business, and make it a fair and equitable place to work, and what your ideas are. I've talked to so many people in the restaurant business, some are here today, where you're like, we have these ideas, we want to do this, we started this organization, and we'll do it if we're in business next month. Yeah. And it's like trying to take care of everybody. Like you're saying, you went for 9 months without paying yourself. We went for so long without paying ourselves. And you have to kind of step back from that and realize none of this is going to exist if I don't take care of myself. And you do that as parents as well, moms and dads. And I'm fascinated by taking those big overarching ideas that Sally and Jessica were talking about and bringing them down to how do you do this on a day-to-day basis, or how do you do it to help shepherd to something that you want to see in your own business or in your own life, or surround yourself with people who can do this as well and help you do that.
Yeah. are any things in particular coming up for you that you think you might try when you are back in your life?
Well, I mean, you've given me a lot of reading material to think about, actually. I'm very, very interested in that, and I think everybody should be curious about that, because that is the link to how we get from this broken place we are to a better model. I mean, look what Alexis and her husband has done with this farm. It's spectacular. I'm a kid from Brooklyn, and I'm fascinated by this whole scene. You know, I'm very much a city person, and my parents moved us from Brooklyn to upstate New York with a vengeance, and they started keeping bees and goats and ducks and grew everything under the sun. My mother's an incredible gardener. And so I have my foot in both worlds, but I am very much a city person. And I'm interested, and a lot of us are. A lot of us drove up here, and we live in a city. So how do you make this work in a city? Mm-hmm. You did, you know, in a way that most of us
Make it work.
yeah, you make it work. I mean, I'm like, I have a few cacti that my mother once said to me, honey, you should grow geraniums because they thrive on neglect. So how do I do all that, you know, that we're talking about? But I can in a business way and try to help people thrive.
Yeah. That's great. I suspect that Helena might have some thoughts around taking care of yourself so that things keep going and things.
Yeah. First, I'm going to touch on the regenerative culture a little bit and economy. And I think when I was thinking about this beforehand, just mentally, I split it up into like fiscal, regenerative, and then on the other side, environmental. And they're definitely intertwined, and they absolutely separate at times. But I think that where do I start? So I think a lot of people are disconnected with nature, with vegetables, with a lot of things. And in that sense, the farmers kind of serve as the connection to the food, and we are the reason that they want to eat certain varieties of things because they knew who grew it. And so after they make that connection, that becomes important to them. And so I think for a lot of people, they just need to have that connection with the environment to realize how important it is. But in our highly pushing convenience lives, it's not convenient to always be outside or to care about things that you didn't care about before. And I just think before all of these wonderful models can be put into place, people have to want them to be put into place, and they have to understand how important they are. And so I think that we really have to serve as that connection to link people to the importance of this. So that's kind of that thought. And then on fiscal regeneration, I really like our small farm model. I'm glad I didn't end up with 40 acres. That is a lot of land. We have 3.5 acres, and just we're able to form really closed loop systems, which as a business owner, bringing in money is really important. And, you know, like we give it to the customer, they give us money, and it just goes right back into getting more seeds to plant more vegetables, and then they buy it again. And so in that sense, we're like financially that's taken care of, and so we just need to like reach out in other ways, I feel. I forgot what else I was supposed to talk about.
No, I think that was exactly
Cool.
right. Yeah. I want to hear from Kelly, but just before that, I want to just let everyone know that we're going to do some question and answer. So if you have things that are in the back of your mind, just kind of have that in mind. We'll do that soon. So Kelly.
So first, thank you for bringing up the reading. I don't know how I missed that in, you know, the earlier answers. I I also read a ton, like, 3-4 books a week, but I just can't dive deep into nonfiction. Like, I have to, I learn best and I formulate best and I imagine best through parable, so I am fiction, science fiction, fantasy all the way, except for, the things around organizations and nonprofits. Start With Why was a really great one. But right now I'm reading this series, I'm obsessed with it, called Red Rising. And it is, I won't tell you what it's about, but y'all need to read it. But there's a part in the book where it's all based on this like Roman society. And one of the bad guys is like, might makes right, and if it's there and I can take it, then it's mine, like he's convinced of this. And he's like, asking the good guy, why you tripping? Like this is the society. It's actually called the society. And I thought to myself, if that's not the title of modern American society, right? Like, it's there, it might be yours, but if I take it, now it's mine, that's just the way it works. And so a lot of folks, many folks that grew up here that are not new residents of America, have that mentality. It's ingrained in us. It's in our stories. It's in our TV. It's in everything we see, right? That, you get that money. You do what you need to do to, get your bag, like make sure that you have money, no matter what it is, like you do what you have to do to have money. No, forget who you hurt to get there. Forget who you've exploited to get there. Just get your money, and then maybe you can look back at your community and be like, I know that you took me in every day after school, Mrs. So-and-so, so, here's a Cadillac, like, and I'm not trying to, crap on anybody that buys their old babysitter a Cadillac. All I'm saying is that it's ingrained in us. And so the idea that we have to change the way that we think is why I work with young children, age 5 and up, is to give them the seed of thought that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be that that you earn this at the expense of your classmate or your neighbor or your fellow Americans, like it doesn't have to be that way. But it's hard because children are beholden to their parents, like the parents run their lives. They're that outside force, right? That no matter how much the kid wants to maybe share their lunch with their classmate, parents are like, why are you hungry? I gave you a lunch. Why are you giving it to so-and-so? It's a thing. And so we have to, I don't know if anybody got a chance to look at our website, but basically the kids plan, plant, harvest, and grow the produce. They plan, plant, harvest, and sell the produce that we grow. And 100% of those dollars are placed in individual savings accounts for them. And so when I first started the organization, I came up with a number, like kids have to spend 100 hours farming, in order to be eligible for this. And nobody has made 100 hours in the, 7-8 years that we've been there. So recently we had this conversation about, well, what's the minimum? What is that floor? What is the floor of how much time a kid could spend on the farm? And even that was an hour conversation, because it was like, well, kids that come to camp every single day spend 3 hours a week on the farm, and so on and so forth. So we need to make that number this. But what about the kids who can't just walk to camp? What if their mom didn't bring them on a farm day? What if, so how is that fair? Like they don't really have agency to say, Ma, you need to get me to the farm so I can, get that money, like it's not, so how can we make it so that, we're being equitable, so that we're being fair? But is it fair to the kids who, actually do, or whose, mom works at 8 o'clock and, she would make sure that they were there for farm time, what is fair, and how can we make these things kind of ingrained? The idea that each kid at the end of the season makes as much as the next one has made interesting conversations with the parents, like, well, I know for a fact so-and-so wouldn't know, only came for 2 weeks, and it's like, first of all, eyes on your own plate. Second of all, like, we don't know what's going on with them. We don't know. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe they have to take the bus. Whatever the case may be. Maybe grandma came to visit. Whatever it is, we need to account for that. And think about, would the kid be here if they could? So we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of work to do. Not just, growing these seeds and making them have an idea that there's more out there. I was explaining to a couple of the ladies during lunch that this is all by design, right? Your capitalism, is all by design, including how much of the world and how many possibilities are shown to our kids, and our families, our parents. You only see red tomatoes. You only see, green broccoli. You only see iceberg lettuce. And so anything outside of that is weird, right? You only see Farmer Bob with the, Bobcat. I think it's whatever. I don't have a tractor. I don't have enough land for a tractor. Whatever the tractor company name is. Thank you. Like green, white. Yeah, John Deere hat, and the coveralls or whatever, looking good as a farmer, like that's what a farmer is. So now you've got, Kelly D. Carlisle, the farmer, and it's like, no, baby, you're a gardener, What do you mean you farm? You got animals, So all of these things to make sure that we expand everyone's knowledge. We mentioned rising tide lifts all boats, It's not just having our youth do this work and our communities see them do this work and know that farming is a viable option, or agriculture. And it's not just farming and agriculture, right? There's all different kinds of things you can do around agriculture. It not only increases the opportunity for youth that most likely have not seen a worm in the ground, but it increases what society sees, it increases what people outside the community understand as fair, understand as a farmer, understand as a Black-owned organization, understand as, a woman-run farm, And then, was there a second part of it? Okay, thanks. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. But definitely read Red Rising, because it is a bomb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So since you've come back,
I'm sorry?
oh yeah,
Oh, thank you. So we came up with 18 hours per season. That allows for kids that come to hang out on the during our open hours, as well as during our work days, as well as the kids that are in the camp. So yeah, thank you.
So since we've kind of come full circle back to perception shift, let's start with some Q&A and hear what you guys would like to know more about. There is a microphone right there. So I'm going to invite people to be bold and stand up and go to the microphone, because if I try to travel with this, we'll all hear awful noises. So anyone want to? There we go.
This is a question mostly for Kelly, but I think everyone could answer it. I was struck when you were talking about waiting for grant funding to come through and the anxiety that causes you. Is there any legislative future or hopes you have, anything you're working towards or working against that you see would help your organization, or more broadly to anyone else on the panel, what you're working against or working for legislatively?
We have been approached about so many policies that folks want to go through want to push through the state, and Acta non verba is not in a position to do that. I can give my opinion on policy, and it's, I didn't necessarily want to go there, but it's so sketchy the way that folks approach me or my organization about policy, right? Like, Kelly, you're a veteran. Shouldn't we do this for veterans? Well, hell yeah, veterans deserve everything, comma. Who is not being served, Kelly, we need your help to get this homemade food bill passed, the thing that Jerry Brown just signed. The thing is that, Black and brown communities have been doing, fairly well doing home-based businesses up until now without this formal policy, right? So who is it really serving? The short answer is no. And I kind of side-eye. I appreciate folks that work towards good policy and good legislation. I am not sure that that's where Acta non verba needs to be.
If I could say something about policy, there's a lot of, in the 18 years I've been working on sustainable food stuff, I've done a lot of work I've given Capitol Hill briefings, and I've done a lot of regulatory briefings and all kinds of stuff. But the thing I'm the most interested in these days, and I think it's really the most important thing for regenerative food production, is about policies that support truly healthy soils. Because that is really where the foundation, quite literally, of sustainable food production is. And I think it takes the eye off of, in my own work, I'm always I'm sort of really focused on animal-based foods. So I have a lot of angry vegans all the time interacting with me everywhere I go. In fact, they literally pick at me quite frequently. And I feel like this is a common ground. This is something that everybody should recognize and agree is important. When you have a truly healthy soil that's not based on chemistry or physics, but based on biology, and viewing the biological health of the soils as the cornerstone, that's a soil that is the foundation for a more diverse ecosystem, and it's more water retaining, and there's just a million things. And there's even the possibility of tremendous climate change benefits. So I feel like it's a common ground too, that whether you're a meat advocate or opponent, you can recognize the value of this. So California is one of the few states, Vermont is another one, that has really taken some concrete steps towards incentivizing good soil stewardship. And I think that's a really rich area for improved policy on both a state and federal level. And it also should be almost non-controversial because there's really no one other than the chemical industry, that should oppose that.
And I'm sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, I just wanted to end in cap. I realized that there was one thing that I didn't say, was that even today in 2018, we see that no matter what the law, no matter what the policy, no matter what the legislation is, it is not necessarily going to be enforced across the board. We have laws around, snatching land. We have laws around what kind of seeds people get. One of the most interesting things I learned as a farmer was that when you buy watermelon seeds, they have to by law tell you how many might fail. That's all well and good. But then we hear, in the last few weeks about a ton of Black farmers that were sold seeds that were made that were grown not to grow, So for me, policy is, the name of our organization is Acta non verba, deeds not words. We do the deeds, and policy is just words unless we become a more fair society where it is protection across the board or opportunities across the board. That's all. Thank you. Sorry.
do you want to talk about policy? Yeah.
Just to echo, the Healthy Soils Initiative is, how many of you have heard of the Healthy Soil Initiative? So there's about $8.5 million allocated this year, and it was because the governor has, well, there's 5 climate pillars, and so Healthy Soils is now one of them in the state of California. So the, yes, controversial cap and trade dollars do go into a greenhouse gas reduction fund, and that greenhouse gas reduction fund is currently allocated to a Healthy Soils program amongst bike lanes and energy efficiency and regulating the smokestacks and tailpipes and modifying them to become compliant with our goals to reduce emissions by, well, we supposedly hit our emissions, our 2020 goal 4 years early, even though we don't count the emissions for wildfires. But anywho, we do have this money that goes into agriculture, and it's the second year of this work being done, and we were able to raise $120,000 in grant monies for our 160-member farmer, rancher, contract grazer community this last year, and then this year we're headed into another round of Healthy Soils funding, and I just found out a couple of days ago that one of the most preeminent agroecological labs at our land-grant universities, the Godin Lab at UC Davis, they just got a demonstration grant that's going to allow them to study integrated crop livestock systems, meaning this idea that we get so irate about animal agriculture, and yet animals have always played such a highly functioning role in landscapes, whether they're domesticated or not. They are part of, herbivory has been co-evolving for 30 million years, and so we actually need animals in the system. And so it was amazing to see the state fund how many functions can you stack on a landscape. Because how many of you know Gabe Brown's work, the farmer with the John Deere hat type guy? Not that he don't think he wears a John Deere hat, because I don't think he tills, but he does not till. But just the idea that he was able to increase his soil organic carbon levels, or soil organic matter, from, I believe it was something like, he went from 6% to 11%. He took this huge jump. He started at like 0.5, and then he did all these incremental things. But it was when he did cover cropping plus his cash crop, 8 species of cover crop and more in that cover cropping, then the cash crop, and then the animal integration throughout, pulsing down the cash crop, pulsing down the cover crop. And that's when you saw the 11.5% soil organic matter, which, if y'all know, like, if we were to do that in California, if we were to just increase our soil organic matter by 1%, go like from 6% to 7%, or God, 6 to 11, that's a whole nother story. But we could sequester 1.5 billion metric tons of carbon out of our atmosphere in California's arable lands, plus our pasture, which are irrigated pastures where animals graze, not to speak of our rangeland systems. Our economy, industrial economy in California, belches only 429 million metric tons as of our 2016 numbers. So think, we could sequester 1.5 billion metric tons with a 1% increase in soil organic matter, and we are emitting, around 429 per year. Million and billion. So an order of magnitude difference. So I think the soils are a very, very, and to get to the Kat Anderson piece, when you talk to native tribes, they're like, yeah, our soils were at 11%, like what you think of 11%, we know our soils were at 11%. You call it a number, but we know how the ecology functioned. And now when we go out and do soil organic carbon testing through our organization, our rangeland systems are like at 0.5%. We have a long way to go, which means, again, back to ecological debt, we can repair these soils, make them higher functioning, sequester not only the emissions, but the legacy load of CO2. So policy, to me, has already started to help our farmers last year. I can see it helping the integrated crop livestock systems research at Davis, which is like a completely industrial agriculture promoting land-grant university for the most part. So to get money into agroecology and diversified intercrop systems, like, I'm seeing policy start to kind of wake up And I'm excited because I have been so like, ugh, for years around getting involved, and we've been involved, and we are writing letters, and we are commenting, and we are doing the public comment periods, and we're writing the grants, and we're giving the feedback on how the grants were implemented, and we're helping implement, and I'm feeling like things are turning. This is where I feel positive about things. So anyway, that's my policy moment talk.
Can I say that there, for a city restaurant owner person who's not involved in the ranching and farming industry, and my recent reading about this that I highly recommend, there was an article in The Guardian, if anybody saw, that said something like, if you want to improve the soil, don't be a vegan. And it went on to explain all of this about having livestock and animals in general being involved in the land, and how that goes to work to what Sally was just talking about. And I got more of an understanding of it because I've decided to have my 11-year-old read and understand more about this. So I went piece by piece by piece through this article with her. So I have a much deeper understanding just from very superficial reading, really. But it was based on work at the Neff farm in the UK. And they've been doing a lot of work also on this very fact, and just talking about how these very small changes can help policy, but also just influence how one even eats or tolerates both veganism and non, as you experience in your life. Yeah.
Can I just say one quick word to tack onto this? I posted that article on my Facebook page, and had a lot of. It's nice when there are these nicely short packaged things. So if anybody can't find it, send me a friend request and look back on my page. Or Defending Beef has it too, so go back there. But Gabe Brown, I just want to quickly say, he's kind of the new poster child for sustainable food production in the world of livestock pro people that I hang around with. And what's really interesting about Gabe Brown is that he was working, he's a farmer in North Dakota that has a diversified farm, and he's been tracking his carbon levels in his soils for decades, working with a USDA soil scientist. So it's been done very systematically. And the most fascinating thing about his talks that he gives is he always emphasizes that the best thing he did, the biggest boost he got, was by increasing the livestock numbers. So the reason I emphasize that is because I think we're so beaten over the head with this message in the mainstream media again and again that livestock is inherently hostile to climate change or good environmental policy or the good, healthy environment. It is so much more complex than that. And I just get so, frustrated by this over and over again. So I love, this example that he provides of how livestock can not only not be, bad for the climate or the environment, but actually might be the key to a healthy environment and reversing or mitigating, at the very least, climate change. It's about, a friend of mine on Facebook as well says it's not the cow, it's the how. So that's my little bumper sticker for everybody to take home on cattle.
That's great. I'm really happy soils came up so that I didn't have to go off on it for a while. Are there any other burning questions okay, we've got one more. Two more.
Hi, my name is Lindsay, and I live in the East Bay. I have a small soup and broth company that I own and operate on my own. And I first just want to acknowledge you, Jessica, for introducing me to the idea of co-opetition. When I was first starting out, Jessica, I got in touch with her about something, and she invited me into Three Stone Hearth to have lunch and to see if there were ways that we could support each other as Bay Area businesses. And it allowed me, in the vein of abundance, to really reach out to the other bone broth companies that have started up in the Bay Area, and just to know that there's enough business for all of us and that we can work together and be in communication and support each other and still have thriving businesses. And your example was what has allowed me to do that. My question is, sometimes I almost feel like a fraud business person, because I'm lucky enough to get to use my business as a way to express my activism for sustainable agriculture. I spent over 10 years living and working on organic farms, and now I'm a food maker, and I'm getting to give my money to people who are farming and ranching in sustainable ways. And it's this really confronting thing sometimes where I almost don't feel like I'm successful because my commitment isn't to making more money and growing my food company. I would rather see small businesses in local communities than my business be the company that's supplying all the... I turned down working with Whole Foods because I didn't want to be the company supplying. I didn't think I could maintain my integrity and be that big. And I wonder if any of you have grappled with integrity versus profit and how you live into that and how you've grown or chosen not to grow and serve your local community, or how wide you want to go with that. Yeah, thanks.
Who would like to speak to that?
So imposter syndrome is a real thing. And it's not just in, business world. I think I read an article, maybe it's on Board Source, about imposter syndrome being very difficult for women. It's difficult for everyone, but, it's being a woman, definitely having this idea that, like, I'm supposed to represent an entire community, I'm supposed to be this, everything's supposed to be great, like, how's the farm going? Excellent. You should see the kids, like it, and having that bubbliness, someone thanked me during the break for keeping it real, and the reality is that, every once in a while there's this brilliant shining moment where, a kid is holding a zucchini and grinning, but, for every one of those moments, they're like, I ain't eating that, So, in terms of turning down work or turning down things because you are afraid, not afraid, but because you're protecting your integrity, that's real AF, as my daughter would say, like it's, Miracle Grow came to our farm and, we love what you're doing. We love what you're doing. It's amazing. We just wanted to know, maybe we can help you out. We started these new little grow pod things, and you just put the pod in there, you water it, and the watermelons come up. And I'm like, no. Now, to be fair, they weren't offering money, right? They were offering these stupid little pods when I could just go and get seeds, right? But it was still like, well, maybe if we grow these pods, maybe later on down the line, there will be some money, right? And money is what keeps our lights on. Well, it's what keeps me able to ride out there and water, when there's no staff. So, yes. Luckily, another urban farm, I guess, took the entire, pod thing. So I didn't have to make that decision and say, no, thank you. It was like an easy no. But recently, we started a partnership where it feels weird, It could be something that's beautiful and amazing, and we do real work. But I want to call them and say, shut it down, shut down the partnership. This isn't doing what I thought it was going to do. You guys have disrespected everything that we hold dear. But we have to keep the abundance flowing. So there's the tension of trying to do the right thing when someone who has more power than you kind of controls which way you can go. So the short answer is absolutely, like having integrity versus, trying to make your bag. And then how to make those two things work is a constant struggle for me.
Yeah, I feel like at Three Stone, this was like just every day what I showed up to is this question that you're talking about. And I think at the end of the day, well, for one thing, as a cooperative, it was actually really beautiful the way we kept each other in integrity, because nobody had to make these decisions in isolation. And so as something came up, I would go talk to, other co-founders or other people in the cooperative, other worker owners. Some things we took to the whole worker ownership. And when I left, there were 19 worker owners, and we would make these decisions as a group. But some things just kind of like an email would land with an offer, and you're like, ooh, you're feeling it out, and you're kind of like, and then you go talk, and then we almost always, there are compromises involved in every business, and so that's just a given. Like, nobody is doing it perfectly. There's no such thing as, it's never utopia. It's just not. So you have to recognize that. But at the same time, there were, in my experience, there were lots of places where we could have drifted away from our mission and our integrity, but instead, as a group, we moved closer towards it. And we helped each other. And just to give you an example, when we first started, we put almost all of the products at Three Stone Hearth are in returnable glass jars. So you pay $1.50 for the jar. You get your bone broth or your soup or a pesto or a tapioca pudding or whatever. It's in a returnable glass jar. You take it home, you eat it, you wash the jar, you bring it back, you get your $1.50 back. And that's how the glass juice keeps coming back. So we've set up a cycle rather than just garbage out, garbage out, garbage out, garbage out. But we had a few things that were kind of inconvenient to put in jars, and so when we started the business, we put them in compostable plastic. And then one of the other members of the cooperative went to a talk at the Ecology Center where they said, this compostable plastic thing is really problematic and not great from an environmental perspective. And she came back and she gave us, and we're like, oh, that's not what we want to hear. It's like, as a business owner, you're like, but it gets more, we're already struggling so hard, and now it's one more thing we got to figure out, da da da. But instead of having that attitude, we're like, that's good information. Let's look at these products and see if we can shift them. And one of them, for example, was granola. We were putting it in a compostable plastic bag. And then somebody was like, well, why can't we put it in a jar? Like, people put granola in jars all the time. Well, you have to make sure the jar is completely dry, which we don't have to do with the soups and stews. And then we're like, well, we can do that. We can make sure the jar is completely dry. And so now our granola has been in jars for years, out of that compostable plastic. And, just one by one, everything that was in these compostable plastic things, we transferred to something more sustainable. And then my co-founder, Portia Kambash, who runs the store, she started working with local people whose products we were bringing in to resell and nudging them to put them in returnable glass. So, for example, there's a company in the East Bay called Cult Crackers. They make these great crackers. They came to us with these crackers, and she's like, we love these crackers, but we would want two changes. One, we don't want this, compostable plastic clamshell. It's got to be in glass, and it's got to be in returnable glass. And second, they were based on corn flour, and we have a lot of paleo people, so she said some other ingredient. They went back, and they came to us with the crackers in returnable glass jars, and actually they pick up the jars at our place. So they bring us as many crackers, and then they take that many jars with them. So we have this cycle that's going. And she's gotten the honey into glass. She's gotten seaweeds into glass. So more and more local products are in this returnable glass. And if you look at the life cycle analyses, if you look at the scientific evidence, returnable glass in a local ecosystem is by far the least resource-intensive way to package food. But nobody does it because it's a big pain in the neck, it's heavy, they break, it's expensive, it's just a big pain in the neck. So nobody does it. But when you're in a context like a cooperative like that, where you're really coming from heart, you want to make a living. Everybody wants to make a living, so that's not it's not like we're naive. We want to make a living, but there was this attitude if it's not good for the environment, we don't want to do it. It's not worth doing. And our mission drift happened the opposite direction. I felt over the 12 years that I was there, by the time I left, we were more mission aligned than we had been when we started, because we brought more people into the cooperative and we were more answerable. We were accountable to each other in a way that as a single sole person, you're not, if that makes sense. This is, I think, something that cooperatives can do in terms of, wow, I've got values, and I don't want to be a part of a business that does that. And we kind of did that for each other in a profound way.
Can I just hop on real quick?
Yeah, and then I think we have to wrap up.
This made me think of, just really briefly, a conversation I had with Tanya Holland of Brown Sugar Kitchen. We were talking, I was telling her that we were getting reached out to by a lot of different people with opportunities, and I just didn't know like what the right ones were to choose. And she just looked at me and said, you don't have to say yes. Like, you don't have to take every opportunity that comes to you. Sometimes it's just best to wait, and at the right time, something will come along, and it will work a lot better than you trying to fit this into, like, this, square into this circle, like, right now. So that's what we do.
That's great. I know there's one more question, but I think for time purposes, we have to do our closing activity and then visit with each other afterwards. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. This has been really fun.
Thank you.
No worries. Can everyone give a round of applause for Erin, our moderator, and for each one of our panelists? Are you feeling inspired? Did you learn something? Raise your hand if you learned something new. Everyone should raise their hands. Awesome. Yes. Okay, so to end our event, I want to make sure that everyone gets to talk to one another and you get to check in with the panelists. Also want to make sure to give a shout out to our vendors here. So if you want to grab some local honey, some amazing lavender products, please make sure you go visit them and say hello. Can you say hi over there? Yay. Great. And on your way out, something that I think would be really wonderful for the Co-Fed family, and especially for Alexis, who has been dreaming about this event for years and could not be a part of it, I created something on the side called our Resume of Abundance. And what I'm asking everyone is to write one thing that you're going to offer, give, or share to your community upon returning back home. So if you'd be so kind and abundant to share that, we have markers and our resumes around the corner. Please be sure to share that. We'd love to see it. You can take a photo of it, inspire each other, and the like. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for being here and for your patience and for your questions. And we have work to do. Yes? Thanks. Thanks. All right, thank you all for being here.